Alright guys, it's Creative Player here, back with the second installment of our tattoo tutorial series, and today we're going to be discussing the ways that we can make words, numbers, and phrases look and flow better on our created fighters. Now, because we aren't able to group tattoo layers together, meaning we aren't able to write a word and then move each of the letters of that word together, morph them, change all of their sizes at once, change the shape of how the word flows all at once. We're left to edit them individually and try and match them, and this is generally what it ends up looking like. It's pretty clear to me at least that this is not how this word is supposed to look. It's supposed to be straight. Here's another example. This is a Cheeto Vera created fighter. Both this one and the last example I pulled off of the UFC 4 Discord. This is not to call anyone out, it's simply to demonstrate that it's very difficult to make words flow nicely on our created fighters. And taking a closer look at the lettering, we can clearly see many things about this tattoo are quite off. We have all sorts of different letter sizes. It's not centered, and it also doesn't flow properly like it does if you take a look at the Cheeto Vera's actual tattoo on the left. The flow of the lettering looks more like a wave rather than a nice half moon shape. And up until recently, I myself had no good way to deal with these problems, as we're going to see in these examples. So this is my Harley Quinn that I completed several months back, and what we're going to be paying attention to is the word rotten written on her cheek. And as we zoom in closer and closer, we're going to see exactly what's wrong with this tattoo. Number one, the letters are all different shapes and sizes. This is why I tried to outline in the previous video why it's important when you're writing words that you should duplicate the first letter rather than creating a new layer for each letter in the word. Second, the opacity is not equal amongst all the letters, again why it's important to duplicate. And number three, it doesn't flow well, just like the previous example. What I was going for here was a nice arcing word, and what we ended up with was every letter was basically sitting at a different angle and did not look nice. Here's my Rey Mysterio. He's got Mexican written on his torso. In this example, I did use duplication, so all of the letters are the same shape and size, but as you can see, the flow is still off, especially the N at the end. And the last example, here's a tattoo on the back of my Bigfoot Silva calf. Again, letters are all duplicated, so they're all the same shape and size, but they just don't flow properly just because I manually placed them and tried to make them a nice arcing shape and failed. So now we're going to take a look at the methods that I've been using recently to remedy these problems. What I've been doing basically is using the shape section and making myself guides on the body that I erase afterwards so I can get a nice flowing word. So right now I'm just placing 3 different guides just as a demonstration to show you how it is helpful when we're trying to make our words look nice. So we're going to run through an example here. I'm going to pick a short word. I'm going to pick the word tiger and wrap it around the circle that I've placed on the bottom so we can get a nice flow to our word. So I'm going to decide on a shape, size, and opacity, and once I have my first letter, then that's my template, and we're going to duplicate for the rest of the word rather than pick new layers. And if you're wondering why I started with the middle of the word, it's because it's the easiest way to keep things centered. If you start with the first letter of the word that you're trying to spell, by the time you get to the last letter, you're going to end up nowhere near where you wanted to be, and you're going to have to go back and move each letter individually until you get it where you want it. So it's just simpler to start in the middle and work your way outwards. So in our case, we have a word with 5 letters, odd number of letters. So I pick the midpoint of the word and stick that right in the middle, work my way right, work my way left. And we very quickly end up with a word that flows nicely, has letters that are all the same shape and size. And then we simply remove the guide, and there it is, the word tiger written nicely on his torso. Now obviously you could apply this technique anywhere on the body with any shape that is available to us in the shape section. Off the top of my head, this would be useful for people who I have seen recently making different versions of Conor McGregor or Israel Adesanya, for example. He has that tattoo that starts on one of his shoulders and it flows down to his chest, and comes back up to his other shoulder. I believe it says broken native. But just as another demonstration, we're just going to do a shorter word again on this guy's chest. So in this case, I used a half moon shape, and I'm just simply going to write the word chest. So again, I started with the midpoint of the word, which was the E. So in this case, I picked a different font, a different size, and then I'm duplicating all of my letters again to keep the font size, shape, and opacity the same. And I'm doing this very quickly, so it's not perfect, but you can see we have a word that basically follows the arc of the guide that we put up there. And then when we're done, we simply remove the guide. In this case, I'm just bringing the opacity down, and we have a nice flowing word on his chest. And we're going to do one last example. So in this case, I'm just going to write the word tattoo on his lower back on this straight line guide that I've placed. And here I am going to use the line going down his back as the midpoint. And since we have a 6-letter word, which is an even number of letters, I can't take the middle letter. So I'm going to just simply divide the word in two, put half the word on one side of the line, put half the word on the other to keep things nice and centered. So again, we're starting with the middle portion of the word or phrase and working our way outwards. So we've picked a different font here. We're going to change the opacity. So a little bit different font size and opacity than the tattoos on the front. And once we decide what we like, we're simply going to press L3 and duplicate and work our way outwards to the right. And then once we have that portion of the word complete, we're going to come back to the first letter that we placed and work our way backwards to complete the word. And like I said, you can apply this technique all over the body with any shape that you can find. I mean, you could write words in a circle if you wanted. You would simply place a circle guide wherever you wanted it and wrap the word around the circle. The only thing that is a little bit difficult is there's no way for us to regulate the spacing in the letters, so that we have to do manually. And now that we've got our word written on his back, we can take the guide off. And boom, we have tattoo written on his back. All of the letters of the word are the same size, shape, and opacity, and most importantly, they're all on the same plane. And now that I have all three of those examples complete, I'm just going to completely delete the guides by highlighting their layer and pressing triangle to delete. So there we have it. 3 simple words or phrases written 3 different ways, flowing along 3 different planes that end up giving us, I would say, more aesthetically pleasing results than just trying to manually create those planes. Before we finish, I'll quickly show you the problem that you're going to run into if you try to start writing a word or phrase with the first letter rather than at the midpoint. So I'm just going to write the word fighter in this Clairvaux font below the word tiger. And in this case, I'm not duplicating my letters. So as you can see, I have to resize them each time. And they're all going to end up being slightly different in width and height. As well, you can see the word is completely off-centered because I started with the letter F. Whereas if I was using the techniques that I outlined earlier in this video, I would have started with the letter H and then worked my way left and worked my way right to make sure everything stayed where I wanted it. And unfortunately, I only discovered these techniques recently, so I haven't been using them a long time and I don't have a lot of examples to show you guys of where they came in useful. But here is one where I inadvertently used a guide. This is Marvin Hagler, and I had put a belt on him with his name. So here I used the yellow rectangle basically to keep all of the letters on the same plane, and I divided the word by placing half of it on one side of the line that defines his abdominals and one side on the other. But here's the best example I have for you. This was a recent one that I did where I used a circle as my guide. This was the Tupac calf that I did, and he has the phrase thug life flowing across his torso in this shape. So I sized a circle in the shape and size that I wanted, and then I took the phrase and divided it in 2, started from the L and worked my way right, and then put the G where I wanted it and worked my way left. and we end up with a tattoo that flows nicely. All the letters are the same shape and size, opacity, rather than a janky word with whack letters that flows like railroad tracks. And that is it for today's tutorial, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.